Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. On today's show, we have Amy Wood. Amy is the program manager for the Most Fundable Companies initiative at Pepperdine's Graziadio Business School. It's a groundbreaking program that empowers early stage startups by providing critical insights into their readiness for private investment. It was launched in 2018, and the program democratizes access to funding, helping promising companies refine their financial projections, market opportunities, and team strengths. Today, we're going to explore Amy's journey, discuss how her work is reshaping the landscape of entrepreneurship and disrupting traditional funding models. So please join me in welcoming Amy Wood. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Fred. Thank you. I really appreciate it. We've been trying to get this done for quite a long time, and I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we finally made it happen. We've been trading emails. I've been, kind of promoting on LinkedIn how unique I think the program is from the first time we connected, and love what you're doing. So perhaps can you maybe level set the audience first with your journey and how you got involved in the Most Fundable Companies initiative and what inspired you to work in this field?
Absolutely. So prior to working in higher ed, I've always worked for corporations. So and my career has always gravitated toward innovation in the roles that I've played. This first happened for me when I worked for a grocery retailer in the late 90s, and they were running a company pilot at the time. I'm kind of dating myself a bit here, but I joined as one of the early employees for that pilot where we were doing grocery home delivery, believe it or not. But we were doing this from a dedicated warehouse. And that pilot turned into a spin out, turned into a $100 million fundraising effort, a successful fundraise. And then in another chapter of my career, I was in the property and casualty insurance industry. And I started in corporate finance and worked in product management, but then again, found myself working in a pilot where we launched and created an in-house consulting agency. And both of these periods, in my career were extremely gratifying to think about and be involved with what's next for those organizations that I was working with. And if we fast forward to Pepperdine and the Most Fundable Companies program, this was another opportunity to build something from the ground up. When I joined, the program was still in the concept stage, so it was an idea. And my role today and how we got here was built on that foundation that I had of broad general management and operations leadership. And once again, was presented with this opportunity to bridge an idea and a strategy with execution to bring it to life. And just as importantly, what's great about what we've done here is I get to do it with smart, nice people.
Yeah, that always makes it better too.
Yeah, totally.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe the core objectives of the program and then secondarily how that helps early stage companies?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, we launched this program in 2018, and Fred, you've been a supporter since the beginning. So again, thank you for that. But at its core, the company educates and evaluates any U.S.-based startup from an investor point of view. Our first objective here is to educate founders on the investor diligence process. Our aim under that objective is to reach as many founders as we can to help them be better prepared to raise funding. Startups don't have to be affiliated with Pepperdine University to enter. We're a national program, and we run it on an annual calendar basis, starting in the first quarter with a series of online surveys that we refer to as rounds, because later on we layer on sort of the competition aspect of it. But any company that completes the first 2 rounds of our online surveys, they receive, it's an automated, but it's a customized report that highlights that company's strengths and weaknesses from an investor's point of view. And in the background, we're using some research-backed scoring, and that is based on analysis of the company characteristics and their funding outcomes. And that first one in educating founders about the investor diligence process. In 2024, we had over 2,300 startups participate, and they were from all 50 states across the US. So our goal each year, and we've done it for 5 years out of the 7 that we've been operating, is we've had participation from companies across all 50 states. Our second objective, so outside of educating the education aspect of the diligence process, is out of all the startups that we learn about each year, from February through September, is we publish our annual list of the top 15 to 20 startups that are, in our view, are worthy of serious investor consideration. And that's called the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School's Most Fundable Companies list. So we publish a list each year. We work with Entrepreneur Magazine. We are in their print edition. We're online. And our aim with this objective, with publishing the list, is to give winners the exposure and PR and connect them with sources of funding in order to advance their trajectory, right? They're all looking for funding. So we're hoping to speed that process up, give them a form of external validation to help them along that path. So far, on that note, we published 7 annual lists, and collectively our list winners have raised over $360 million and counting, I would say, since we just added a few just a month ago. So we're constantly tracking the company's success, both of the winners and then of our non-winners. And I can touch upon that a bit later when we talk about some of our research.
I think it's so interesting. And one of the things I've always loved about what you all are doing is it kind of complements the way venture fuel views startups, because we work for the large organizations, the big corporations, and so we take a very almost like a scientific approach to, is this company enterprise ready? Are they ready to partner and pilot and scale with a Fortune 500? And I've always thought like there's something really interesting about that, is we can see a founder and say, hey, these are the things you need to do in order to get ready to work with a Comcast or a Pepsi or somebody like that. And you all are doing that from the investor lens, which is, those are the two places startups go to grow, right? Is to get commercial deals or to go raise money. And so I think it's just such a valuable lens and feedback loop for an early stage company. Can you talk at all? Obviously, I'm sure a lot of it is very proprietary, but the things that are maybe move the needle in terms of, or just some examples of things that you all look for in order to determine if a startup is fundable.
Yeah, I can speak to that from the research and the data-driven approach. Our executive director, Craig Everett, he's a full-time faculty finance PhD who leads the research that drives our program. And I had to write this down a bit, so I'm gonna because this is in his words, because I am not the PhD, but his explanation is that our scoring algorithm has evolved into a dynamic model that changes each year on statistical analysis of the funding outcomes of past participants. So past participants here, he's referring to both winners and non-winners, right? So companies that make our list, the winners, and then companies that don't make the list. We're pulling out sort of the top 15 to 20, as I mentioned, and promoting them each year. But that doesn't mean that there are other companies who are participating that aren't raising funds and aren't found as fundable. We're just trying to promote the most fundable, right? And so what he goes on to explain is that the reality in the startup world is that VCs look for what VCs look for in their portfolio companies evolves over time. What they're looking for this year may not be exactly the same as what they were looking for last year. So by doing analysis on the existing companies, modifying our scoring algorithms, doing that based on follow-ons with company participants, we're shifting our scoring and hopefully staying in lockstep with what the VCs are looking for each year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and we're doing that across all aspects of the company's business plan to figure out which ones, which aspects are which elements within those aspects of the business plan are more relevant. So revenue, for example, if we're looking at the company's financials, are more or fewer pre-revenue companies getting funded? That's we've seen some shifts there.
Oh, yeah.
Founder age. Craig, he published a white paper based on founder age and founder education. Interestingly, founder education, for example, it's generally the higher the education level, the more likelihood that the company will get funded, but that plateaus when you get to a PhD level, which is kind of interesting. So it's not a straight upward trajectory there. So that's part of what we're doing. And then he also works on another program called the Pepperdine Private Capital Markets Report, which is focused on mid-market level companies. So most Fundable Companies program is at the early stage startup, pre-revenue, pre-seed through generally Series A funding, and then there's another body of research where it's focused on later sort of mid-market level companies. So we're able to lean on both of those.
What do you think is maybe on the other side of this for startups that is the gap, maybe the thing that gets sort of comes to light most frequently of like, oh, this is an area they need to improve? I know each startup is going to be totally different. It's all over the map, but are there any commonalities of challenges that sort of get uncovered most frequently during the review process? It's, you need more revenue, need more teams, knowing that those are going to move around from like a weighting standpoint. But just curious if there's any sort of commonalities that you all see.
Well, so I guess I would answer that question this way. One thing that makes us different from a lot of other competitions, for example, and a lot of school-based programs is we're not a pitch competition, right? So founders, we know founders have plenty of places where they can work on their pitch, right? So we're focused a bit more downstream on what happens next. Say you get the interest of potential investors, right? And so what happens there oftentimes is that companies, they don't know the challenges that come up is, companies may not understand the difference between being a small business and a scalable startup. So companies kind of come to that realization that, why are you guys asking me all this? This is way too much work. This is, more than what I can focus on. Fundraising is a full-time job for the founder and the CEO, right? I think we've had many people share that. And particularly with technical founders, I find that they struggle with that more because they're working on either building the product or clinical data that they need, say if they're more life science based. And so they're caught between fundraising and then their operational responsibilities that they might have within the company. Other challenges here, back to the small business, or maybe you're a single product company, they're going to have a more difficult time raising capital from angel investors, right? Than they would maybe, more appropriately, maybe should be seeking funding from, asset-backed lending, or maybe working on vendor contracts that are more favorable that can help them with things like cash flow, as opposed to seeking outside investment in the company. I would just say to the founders out there, please don't say you don't have any competition. That's not the case. That's never the case.
I'm the only one that does this, though.
I know you can have a first mover advantage, but you do have competition. There's a difference there. And so perhaps you're solving a problem and you're a first mover in that regard. You may be the first to address a pain point that exists in your industry, but you always have competitors. I see that often come up. And what happens with our process oftentimes is when companies understand or they come to realize that these gaps exist for them, they may not continue in our process, right? So going back to the most fundable companies program, they might realize that, you know what, the timing or, the path of seeking outside investment is not right for me or my company right now or ever. And so for us, that's just as an important an outcome as having a company successfully complete the process, get the feedback forms, sort of think through the strategic thinking, the strategic planning exercise that we take founders through, and or maybe they make the list and they're a list winner and they are, they're out there, they've already raised some funding and they're looking to raise their next round, and we can help them do that. So we kind of look at it on, from two perspectives.
I'm curious what you think, obviously you'll be a little biased, but what role in today's economy does a university or academic institution like Pepperdine play in innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you asked this question because, being part of an educational institution like the Graziadio School, we have the ability to do multiple things, right? We can support lifelong learning. I'm a big advocate of lifelong learning. And we can meet people wherever they might be in their entrepreneurial journey, right? So we're not the only ones who can do this, but at our school, I can just use us as an example. We have a range of programs that range from full-time to part-time to executive education. We have certificate programs that are much more condensed and concentrated, both in terms of the subject matter as well as the time that they take to complete. And so, I think about this, whether you're thinking of an idea and you want to immerse yourself in a program that can help you build out that idea into your company, or get you started on the path to building your company. Schools play a huge role in that. Schools have tech transfer offices. They can also be a great resource for maybe you're not the technical founder, but there's a technical founder who needs a CEO. They play an important role. We have, say you're later stage, you're running the company, you might not be able to do a full-time program, but you're a CEO who's transitioning into being a founder to a CEO. And that's where things like executive education can come into play. There are different skills that are required at different stages of running companies, right? So that's sort of, sort of what I'm getting at. Or maybe it's your team. You need to develop your team, right?
Sure. I mean, we had a really good episode fairly recently with Pablo Narciso, who had written a book that was called Founder to CEO. And I thought it was just such a very simple title, but like such a real problem is there's something about the founder mindset that is just so powerful to start. And then there's a real moment of transitioning to now you're the CEO.
That's right.
How do you make that jump? And what do you need to learn? And like all of a sudden you're dealing with things like HR and things that like maybe were not there, especially if you're a technical founder at the outset. You were just product. And that's a very interesting transition that most founders have to go through.
I'll give you, there's three other things if we can just stay on this topic for a moment. Being part of a school. So our program, we leverage other areas of the school, right? We have professors who are serving as judges. We have a lot of practicing faculty. So they're one faculty member I work with, he runs a family office. So they're potential investors. We have our most fundable companies list winners, for example. We integrate them into our learning environment. We have, a lot of MBA programs have these. Ours is called MBA consulting programs. Ours is called E2B, Education to Business. So we've had most fundable companies list winners be the clients for those MBA consulting projects. That's huge. Those are things that startups can't afford. I collaborate with another professor on a class called Demystifying Venture Capital Investment. So if these are for, students who are interested in private equity, don't have any experience and are curious about it. So we use Most Fundable Companies as case studies, right? So they're writing deal memos on Most Fundable Companies list winners. Again, those deal memos are another form of feedback. It's almost like free consulting for the companies as well. We have other complementary events, right? Our Most Fundable Companies showcase each year, of course, is one for the business school, but we have others like we have a SEER symposium, it's called. So that's focused on social, ethical, and environmental responsibility. Those are focused on innovation, and startups absolutely have a role. We have a healthcare symposium, the future of healthcare. Startups and innovation absolutely play a role in that industry as well. So we're able to leverage other aspects of the program that not only benefit the companies, but provide more enriching experiential learning for our students. So it's a win-win. Oftentimes, some of these engagements also lead to their form of recruiting, right? So, so the startups are able to hire interns, possibly, or full-time employees coming out of some of these engagements. So, I guess my message, Fred, for founders out there, and when it comes to thinking about educational institutions, is don't assume that the resources at schools in your community, or those that might be in Malibu, California, like Pepperdine, don't assume that they're not available to you just because you didn't go to that school or you're not currently enrolled with that school. Our Pepperdine Most Fundable Companies is a testament to this, and there are more examples out there, obviously, but I'll say it again, we're available to any US-based startup, right? So, and geography, I think, matters less to companies right now too, both in terms of seeking funding and a program like ours, right? So we're national, we're available to any US-based startup, as I said. And so I think the connection and sort of it's easier for founders who may be across the country to think about participating in a program that is on the other side of the U.S. and with a school that they're not affiliated with. So I just encourage founders to take advantage of those resources.
I also have to say, the first time I saw Pepperdine, I was in my young mid-20s, and I drove by. I said, "What the heck is that?" With all these beautiful, this gorgeous lawn overlooking the ocean, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's Pepperdine," and I was like, I called my mom on the spot, and I was like, "How did you not tell me about that university? Like, that's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life." So if I would say anybody that can figure out a way to work with you just to be there in person, it's worth it. And I'm a very virtual hybrid advocate, but I think that's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Indeed, it is. Every year in February, I kind of pinch myself that I get to live and work in this part of the country. And when we have our showcase each year, we do invite all the founders from the list winner companies, and they come and they present in person. Otherwise, our program is fully virtual. But inviting people to come and present at the very top of that campus, overlooking the ocean, is really not a hard sell.
No, not at all. Well, let me ask you one more question, and then I'll kind of get you out of here on time, I hope. One of the things we talked about is like reasons or things that within the survey you all look at to help determine if they're fundable, and revenue being one. And venture feels very much in this corporate space. And I'm curious, one of the things that gets debated is corporates on a cap table, and this idea of corporate venture capital, and do startups want it because it moves a little slower sometimes than traditional venture capital. I don't know if anything's come up in your work, but I'd be curious if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah, that is interesting. And we do ask for, in our surveys, we do ask where the sources of funding have come from, if you've already raised them, whether they're in the form of grants, if they're angels, VCs, corporate grants, and then also where you're seeking funding going forward. I don't know that we have any empirical data on that I could share, other than knowing that, through our discussions with investors and with founders, I can anecdotally share that, having a corporate on the cap table, certainly is a signal. It's a signal that someone with, industry expertise and domain expertise believes in you and the team, that whatever you're endeavoring to do, that you can be successful at it. So angel investors, I think, it's a point of validation. I feel like I should be asking you this question, by the way.
It is fun to hear no, I mean, I think you're nailing it, right? There's upsides for sure in terms of validation. There's reasons to believe once you see a big company, because how much diligence had to go into that. On the flip, I would say from like a VC lens, when you see a corporate on the cap table, it's both that validation, but also then, okay, are they going to try and acquire this, and are they going to acquire it quickly before it has a big enough multiple to make it interesting for me as a VC? So it has some baggage with it.
Yep.
To some VCs that are looking at very specific types of investments. But overall, I think I always say that that's the way that our name came from, is the best way to fuel your venture is to go work with blue chip enterprises to validate, to pay for what you're trying to provide, to prove you're a real business, and seeing that repeatable process of working with large companies, that gives the ultimate sort of stamp of approval when you're trying to evaluate, is this something that can scale? And then it's a way to actually, drive revenue without diluting your ownership if you're a founder as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Absolutely. And, they're like any investor, right? It has to be a good match, both in terms of the strategic objectives, the benefit in addition to the funding, but the access to resources, the ability to bring the company to scale faster, to get follow-on investors, additional customers, right? So there are so many benefits. And some of the risks, as you mentioned, are the multiples. Are they going to, having an acquirer is good, right? So having an exit, a potential exit that someone can see more clearly, obviously, I think is beneficial. Perhaps timeframes, changes in strategic priorities, right? Speed of decision making; those can be things that can make it a negative. But as long as everyone has, as best they can, fully vetted all of that before the corporate investment happens, and the existing investors are brought alongside that, and they're brought along through the whole process, then hopefully some of those risks have been mitigated. And that's what we're all about, right? So this is one of, if not the riskiest asset class, right? So it's all about de-risking the investment opportunity and making and increasing the likelihood of a good return, right? So no matter who's on the cap table, that's always a consideration.
Yeah, very, very well said. Well, Amy, let me ask you this. Where can people go to learn more about the program, maybe see the latest companies? How can they help? How can they get involved?
Yes, all of the above. And we rely on volunteers. I'll say that. I'd be remiss not to also acknowledge our partners. Our title sponsor for the past few years has been the Singleton Foundation for Financial Literacy and Entrepreneurship. Another benefit of being part of a school is an alumni base. And Will Singleton, his wife, Carrie, Will is a Pepperdine alum. His wife, Carrie, started the foundation. They have a suite of products that are available out there that are free resources for entrepreneurs and the general public to learn about financial literacy. We're grateful to them and their partnership. Come to our website. We are at bschool.pepperdine.edu/MFC for Most Fundable Companies, where you can learn more about our partners, volunteering, We rely on financial support. So, support comes in terms of time, talent, and treasure. You can see all of our prior list winners. And also, we're right there on the business school website. So we're part of the whole Pepperdine Graziadio. You can see our programs that are available out there as well.
Wonderful. Amy, thank you so much for your time today, for all the amazing work you've been doing for so long. I'm glad we got to have the conversation, and excited to see the next round of companies coming out.
Fred, thank you so much. You are the venture fuel visionary yourself. One of the best things about this work is the ecosystem, and I appreciate you being part of it.
Wonderful. Thank you.